Michelle.
Daniel.
OG Rose.
And today we're going to be talking about the problem of scale from Belonging Again II.1. We thought we'd reflect on this some because it's a central idea of the book, and also we have a Parallax session coming up. We've really enjoyed the course so far with Sweeney and everyone. It's really been a blast. And so the problem of scale is something that comes up in the book, and we thought we'd just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's been great. I just want to reiterate that at Parallax. And yeah, I think that what's kind of coming to mind is this question for me about scale, which is obviously a big part of Belonging Again II.1. And I'm wondering if, considering the Game B Dark Renaissance topic that comes up, and which is kind of fleshed out, there's something about the question, the broader question of, why does scale matter? Does it matter? There's a part of me that sort of sees Game B as thinking about potentially scaling, but trying to keep kind of like small communities. Whereas for me, Dark Renaissance, I think they have a really great project as well. But I almost feel as if it's like, we're not trying to scale this. That's not the point, right? Like there's something, and I'm not saying that's the case. I don't actually know. I'd probably need to talk to those who are really have the vision for it. But I think that is interesting though, because maybe in a way there is something about it that's not, there could be an approach that is, I want to say, we're not going to really concern ourselves with scale, and that's okay, right? That is one approach. And the other might say, we are going to concern ourselves with scale. However, if that approach, and I'm talking Game B here, is not thinking about, like we talk about negotiations between human beings, or having to keep it small in order to, like even like these little bubbles, right? Like these small little communities of it. How does that work in general? Because it's an important point that for something to be able to scale, and why scale is important to consider, in my opinion, and for the work, is that it's something that things that are able to work, whether you agree with it or not, are usually the things that are ultimately going to be able to get the biggest, if you will, or like be able to scale to the greatest number.
No,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of tensions. I think the problem of scale is one where after the 20th century with totalitarianism, various oppressions, there's an idea of all scaling tends to be problematic, so let's not do it. But then if you don't do it, there's a feeling of, well, capitalism has already scaled, the global order as of something has scaled, and so we either accept that or scale something alternative. But what could you possibly scale alternative that wouldn't make things worse, have unintentional consequences? Now, of course, perhaps that very nervousness to take on any big imaginative alternatives precisely plays to the hand of the capital nation state.
Right.
Plays to the hand of the status quo. That's something maybe a Mr. Benjamin Studebaker would suggest. But at the same time, there's also a vast wisdom in not falling for schemas of cosmic justice, as like a Thomas Sowell would say. And also, the book talks about the four arrows. It talks about the pricing mechanism of Friedrich Hayek that really cannot be overstated in its in the role that it plays in society with the distribution of limited resources, signaling for where resources to go, so on and so forth. At the same time, that very system of distributing resources can be precisely what people feel is oppressive, because then you're under wage labor, lack of time, energy, and so on. But the system that takes your time, energy is also what provides a way to distribute resources. Now, maybe you say AI will take care of it. Well, we'll see. But then maybe that just means the companies that own AI will control this technology of coordination and thus be very powerful. I think Dark Renaissance, which Owen and Raven are doing work with, and Daniel Frege, there's this idea, there's always this human pathos. If you create a perfect world, there's going to be one guy who sets it on fire,
right,
or who messes it all up just to mess it all up. And I think of Mr. Frege and Mr. Cox's conversation with Jim Rutt on that. Also, there's the problem where, sure, all the Game B communities can agree environmental sustainability is important, but not everyone might agree. Here's the problem, not everyone might agree on what constitutes environmental sustainability. Some people might think it's immoral to own stock in Chevron. Other people might think it is. It isn't immoral. well then who goes?
Yeah.
It's the moral real always upsets projects of centralization. And you could look at that as the pathos that's going to come through. What is that moral real that's going to come through and break it all apart? And how could you even plan for that? Owen and Joshua had a tremendous class on Paul Virilio. At one of the lectures, Owen was talking about how animals have very vast periphery vision precisely because they have to be ready for surprises. They have to be able to see to the side so that they survive. And there's a way in which to scale, to have a kind of project is more of a tunnel vision of what you're going to scale, which means you don't have peripheral vision, so you get taken off guard by something unexpected. And it's going to, Paul Virilio will talk about how the screen today focuses our attention so we don't see dangers from the outside because we're distracted by the screen, so we don't have peripheral vision. So there's something about the idea of scaling that seems to remove peripheral vision in dangerous ways. And yet at the same time, if you don't focus on something, how in the world can you ever hope to finish something, to do something of grandeur, right? So there are all these tensions with scale. The other one that the book talks about is between system and programming and ideology and negotiation. A system works precisely because it doesn't require the human element. That's why it works. You don't have to negotiate everything, which is really hard with different ideologies, different worldviews and stuff, and people disagree and then they get angry and kill one another. But the vice of systems is precisely that it works without the human element, that it works with programming. So you say, well, let's do negotiation. Let's just kind of talk all the time about what we're going to do. Well, that's really hard to do with diversity and pluralism. So we haven't figured out how to have a system that doesn't flatten difference in the process of scaling. In the process of scaling, it tends to go to the most common denominator and define people according to that common denominator. But that can make people feel flattened and reduced in different things. So how do you avoid reductionism? Basically, how do you have a non-reductionist scale? Like, how do you have a non-reductionist scale? There's so many people on the liminal web now talking about reductionism as the problem. Well, reductionism comes into existence to deal with the problem of global pluralism. We are going to reduce everyone, flatten everyone to commodity forms, commodity prices, stuff like that, because then the Hindu and the atheist and the Christian can understand one another even if they don't understand one another's worldviews. So there's a certain logic in reductionism, but that very move creates a habitus that makes people feel reduced. So these are some of the tensions that come to mind.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if what you'd say to this thought. Yeah, that's good. It makes me wonder if there was a time when even if scale was at play, it didn't matter as much. But now that we have, like, just even you talking about pencils, for the most part, like most places in the world can get a pencil. Which, if you stop and think about, is pretty miraculous.
Right.
Just because, can I make a pencil by myself? No, I could maybe make charcoal if I burn a stick and I could write with it. But I couldn't make a pencil as we know it with an eraser and that little metal part and, the coating and the wood, all that stuff. I couldn't, and then the lead, well, whatever they use these days. I couldn't make it myself. And so I think there's something interesting because, or like take the internet, another very good example. It's ubiquitous, right? It's pretty much everywhere. So now it's like there's really no way to get around the question of scale, even if it was already something that one couldn't get around before, but it's just that it wasn't as visceral or evident or something to the common person. Yeah, I'm just thinking about maybe why it would be necessary to like give it a lot of attention sociologically.
Well, because the ways that you say make technology available to people on Earth through the pricing mechanism simultaneously creates a social horizon of understanding one another according to their jobs or their pay or commodities, of which then makes people feel reduced to that identification. So the very economy that makes possible technological advancement also trains us into ways of socially interacting with one another that makes people feel, well, mentally ill, depressed, anxious, undefined, isolated, autonomous, and things like this. There's a difference between market economy and market society following École Planier, and we have not appreciated that having a market economy also will bring with it certain modes of orientation. It requires a market society to work. Like, you have to think of the world in terms of capital. So if that's the case, then you can't ignore. Yep. So the issue is that with market societies, market economies, market societies, the thing that you scale creates a certain habitus that affects people.
Yeah.
And you cannot avoid that. And also there's the issue that the thing that is scaled is causing the meta crisis, is causing unintentional socioeconomic crises, or destroying limited resources or things like that. So if you just get rid of the problem of scale and don't worry about it, well, the issue with that is that the thing that has scaled has unintentional consequences. So you have to either say none of that is a problem, any of the meta crisis stuff, or if you accept that there's some reality to it, or game theory dynamics, multipolar traps, and all of that, then you can't ignore the problem of scale. But of course, then with the problem of scale, there comes all sorts of various pathologies or things like that. But there's more to say on that, so we'll continue talking about that soon, and we have the Parallax course coming up, but we just wanted to jump in and start framing this problem of scale that we're very concerned about at OG Rose and think really needs to be addressed.
Yes, for sure.